Turn up to me. Check there.
All right.
This is on.
Hello, everyone. Apologies for a little delay. We're trying to get the things fixed before we start the presentation. My name is Vladimir Petrosian. I'm a technical product manager for Intune Configuration Manager. With me, I have Mark. You want to introduce yourself?
I am Mark Florida. I'm a program manager lead on the config manager and Intune team. Thanks for taking the time to see us today. Packed room. That's awfully exciting to see. We should have gotten a slightly larger room. So thank you, and thank you for those who are watching this on the live stream as well.
And we do apologize for that. We had the last minute change for the room, so that's how we moved to this smaller room. We have a lot to cover today, so there's going to be a lot of exciting news for both Intune and Configuration Manager. So first, a quick overview of what's going to happen today. We're going to talk about, the vision. So I can't walk that way. I should probably know. We're going to cover our vision for device management as well as client management, which includes our Microsoft Intune service as well as System Center Configuration Manager. We're going to talk about the new features that we released in both Intune and System Center Configuration Manager as well. The first part of our presentation here is going to be all about enabling your users to be productive on any device while keeping the corporate data protected. The second part of our presentation today will be about Windows 10 management. As you guys heard, Windows 10 has a lot of really cool features, and both Microsoft Intune and System Center Configuration Manager are prepared to take full advantage of that. And finally, you'll realize, hopefully after today's presentation, then since the last time you heard about Intune in one of the presentations we did before, there are a lot of new features that are introduced in Intune. They were introduced in November, in December, and now we have monthly releases starting from January. So the agenda again for today is a quick overview of what's going to happen. We're going to talk about enabling your users and protecting your data. I'm going to cover that part. The next one, unify your environment and Windows 10 management, will be covered by Mark. So how many of you guys were at the foundation session for the Enterprise Ability just 30 minutes ago, if you can raise your hands? So good number of you guys. Brad mentioned Intune. He talked about the mobile application management. In our foundation session 30 minutes ago, we talked about the fact that mobility is here. There's nothing new for me to really cover. You've probably seen this slide somewhere. The reality nowadays is that most of the employees and users now have multiple devices. You can have your iPhone, your Android, your Windows phone. They have a tablet. They have a Windows probably PC for work, such as laptop. That's the reality nowadays. People work not only from offices. Even between your meetings, you go to a meeting from a meeting, you check your phone to see what's going on. You go to a coffee shop, you work there. That's the reality nowadays. The important part here is the fact that for those devices, people still want to be productive. The key is the fact is that if the IT doesn't enable them to be productive, they'll find a way to be productive, which means they'll use an app or a device they're not probably supposed to use, but because they need to get their stuff done, they'll use it anyway. So as you can see here on the screen, there's a lot of interesting statistics here that shows you the fact that by 2017, most of the enterprises are going to have 2 or more operating systems that they need to support. Right? Obviously, it's Windows, iOS, and Android is coming there as well. And a lot of employees, as I mentioned before, end users, they have multiple devices for their day-to-day activities to just get their stuff done, both on the personal level, for their personal life, but as well for work as well. And the explosion of our cloud applications, we call them software as a service, SaaS applications, is here as well. As you can see, a lot of work gets done for using on SaaS applications as well, like your Dropbox, your Box, Salesforce. Those are some of the versions of, or some of the applications your employees use as well to get productive. So what's really happening here, as I mentioned before, is the explosion of devices, right? In the past few years, there's just so many different devices, different colors, shapes, different screen sizes. And again, people like to prefer a device they actually like and the one they use, right? In the past, the corporations would give their BlackBerries to their employees for work purposes. Now it's a little different story. The story nowadays is that the employee comes to work and says, I have an iPhone, I want to get my work done, help me. If you don't do it, I'll do it anyway, I'll find a way to do it. That's the devices part. For applications, most of them are now either applications on devices themselves, the applications you can install from the App Store, from Windows Store, or applications available in the cloud as well. As I mentioned before, things like Salesforce, Dropbox, and thousands of other applications. Again, if you don't manage it, the users will use it, and they'll keep the corporate data in places they're not supposed to use. And the problem here is with the data itself is that if the data is stored in locations it's not supposed to be stored, it might leak somewhere. You might have problems. As you probably heard in the past few months, there's been a lot of breaches and the data is stolen, but that's a way when the hackers themselves steal the data. But a lot of cases, the data is just simply stored in a location it's not supposed to be stored. The way Microsoft looks at it, we take a people-centric or user-centric approach. Again, you might have heard that term before. What we're saying here is that we focus on the user itself. We don't really care what the device the user has. We'll manage it anyway. If it's a Windows device, we'll manage it. If it's iOS, Android, or Windows Phone, we'll manage it as well. Includes Mac and Unix as well for the System Center Configuration Manager. The point is that we focus on users since the Configuration Manager 2012. We don't manage the devices anymore. We still manage the devices, but our focus is on the users. And whatever device the user has, we manage it as well. Some of our other vendors in the market, they are still device-specific. And yes, you can manage the device. You can deploy the password requirements, other settings. You can block specific settings in the device itself. You can deploy applications. We can do that as well. But we go beyond that. We focus on the user, and we protect the applications that the user accesses or the devices the user uses. And the second part of our story is we unify the environment. So whatever investments you already have in your on-premises Azure Active Directory, in the System Center Configuration Manager, most of our customers have at this time, you can extend that to the cloud, enable access for your users to use the applications in the cloud, use their devices of their own choice. So having said that, I'm going to move on to our first section of our presentation, which we're going to talk about enabling your users to be productive on any device while keeping the corporate data protected. When it comes to that, in our story here, we're using both Intune and System Center Configuration Manager to get that done. As Mark will cover later, you have options as a customer to decide how you want to manage your devices, both on-prem, your Windows desktop, Windows servers, Mac and Unix machines, as well as mobile devices, as I mentioned before, iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and Windows as a mobile device as well. So one part of our story here is mobile device management. This is done by Microsoft Intune. Okay? Intune is able to manage the devices that are internet-based. It's a cloud service. We get the updates basically every month now. So we're going to cover that a little as well. And as Mark will mention later, you have an option to integrate Intune with System Center Configuration Manager so you can manage both of your mobile devices and the on-prem devices from the same System Center Configuration Manager. So the admins that already have years and years of experience with the Configuration Manager, they can use the same interface that they're used to manage the mobile devices as well. The second area is application management. This includes the application management for your mobile devices as well as on-prem machines as well. So one part of this story is the ability to deploy and manage the applications themselves. So you can deploy, you can send the updates, remove if needed. The other part of our story is really exciting that we started a few months ago, and what Brad showed you earlier with the Outlook app, and if you came to the foundation session I showed you as well, is the ability to send app-level restrictions on mobile devices. So you as an admin can decide what can the users do with the application themselves. So this goes beyond the device settings. You can actually secure the application themselves on both iOS, Android, and Windows 10 coming soon as well. And the last part is a comprehensive Windows, Linux, Unix management done through Configuration Manager. As you'll hear soon, we have a session that you'll probably need to check out as well. Intune will be able to manage Mac devices as well, but Configuration Manager is a solution to provide really deep-level management of your Windows servers, your Windows desktops, as well as Linux, Unix, and Mac machines as well. So that's kind of an overview of our solution here. We're going to talk about both Intune today and Configuration Manager. The next few slides I'm going to show you, the important part for you to understand, all these features are available not only from Intune standalone, which is a cloud service. You can get the same functionality from Configuration Manager integrated with Intune as well. So again, as a customer, you have an option. So the first and very basic theory here, again, to enable your users to be productive on their devices, you as an IT admin need to be enabled to deploy applications. That's very important. You need to be able to deploy resource access profiles like Wi-Fi, email, VPN, certificates. These are the things that enable users to get access to corporate resources without really doing much of work. They don't have to go to their iOS device and enter the information about their email and password, server, make a mistake, give you a call, and then you're not you specifically, but probably your help desk are going to waste time trying to help them out. Intune can automate that process. Again, not only Intune, Configuration Manager as well. It can automate that process for you. Same story about the applications. If you don't enable users to be productive with the applications they want, they'll find it anyway and install it, which is a problem, again, as I mentioned earlier. Another important area for the IT is able to deploy device settings. Again, you can deploy device settings across platforms. This is very basic scenario, but we covered that as well for both Windows Phone, Windows, iOS, and Android, and Mac coming soon as well. And the last point here on the slides is collect device information as well, right? So you need to have information about the device, the state, the battery, the serial number, for example, for your own report. So that can be done through Intune as well. When it comes to being able to make your users, enabling your users to access corporate resources, one of the main and most important scenarios is email profile deployment. Again, this is just a part of the story. I mentioned you can do similar things for Wi-Fi, VPN, or certificate, for example, but email is what most of the customers want to solve first. This is a pretty simple concept where Intune is able to deploy an email profile to the device, which means the device then for the user can easily access your Exchange server, both in the cloud, like Exchange Online, or your on-premises, that some of our customers have as well, or the hybrid solution. So the idea here is that, again, this saves time for your employees. They don't have to do this manually. This can be done through Intune automatically. As you can see on the screen, we support this for multiple platforms. There is options you can define within the email profile as well. So it's not only account and password. You can define how often you want the email to be synced. Certificates, if you want that, you can authenticate your users with certificates as well. So again, you have options as an IT admin to choose the settings for the email, the one that you want. So that's just a quick overview of ways you can enable users to be productive on their mobile devices. Another important area that a lot of people don't really realize fully is the fact that your employees have access to our Intune company portal app across different platforms. What this does is gives them the ability for some of the self-service, right? As an IT admin, yes, you can deploy applications. You can manage the devices. You can remove the devices from management, remove corporate data. However, the employees themselves, the users themselves, can do it on their own. We provide a consistent user experience, again, across platforms. These applications are available in the public app store, so the employees can themselves download and enroll in order to access their corporate email or applications or other corporate resources. They can discover and install applications, right? So not only they can enroll the device for management to get access to corporate resources, they can also install the applications. They can manage all of their devices. So if you have multiple devices as an employee, in my case, I probably have 7 today or more. Most people have 2 or 3. They can see all of their devices in the company portal. And if they lose it, for example, they can actually selectively or fully wipe the device remotely from the Intune company portal, do a sync to get the new settings or applications. Again, things like that are available from the portal as well. Another new feature that we released a few months ago is terms and conditions. So it's a feature that a lot of our customers requested us. They want to be able to, when the users enroll their devices, they want to be able to tell the users what they're signing up for, right? In some countries, it's basically a requirement. You kind of have to. For other customers, it's just probably nice to do. So your employees know that you're not going to really touch their personal pictures. You're not going to download their data. You're only going to manage the corporate part of the device. So you can define your own terms and conditions that the employees need to approve before they enroll their device. And the last point here is the ability to contact the IT. So this basically gives the employees opportunity to contact your help desk in case they have any problems. Again, pretty basic stuff, but this is the stuff your employees need really to actually get their stuff working for a corporation. So far I was talking to you about the ways you can enable users to be productive on their devices. Another very important area is data protection, the corporate data protection. So the way it works today, if you look at some of the other vendors in the market, the way it's done today, almost all of the corporate resources are on-premises. SharePoint on-premises, Active Directory, Exchange, servers, work folders, other type of shares. So most of the corporate data is safe. It's behind the perimeter, behind the firewalls. And the way the corporations actually manage the access to this is through gateways, through firewalls, through different policies, as you can see on the screen, that they can define. So if you have a PC, if you have a mobile device, if you're trying to access corporate data from outside, you still have to go to the perimeter network or DMZ to actually get access to your corporate resources. This is the state we are really today. The thing that's different nowadays is that a lot of corporate data is moved to the cloud. As I told you before, email is now in the cloud for a lot of our customers. SharePoint for documents there as well. identities in the cloud, applications are in the cloud, data in the cloud. So how would you protect the data itself, right? You don't have the ability now to build those perimeters, build those gateways to actually do it. There is a way to do it. It's not probably the best way because you have to route all the traffic from mobile devices through a gateway again on premises to get there. What we've been working on for the past year or two, actually, we've been trying to actually include this knowledge and this protection inside the applications, inside the cloud, inside the devices themselves. As I showed a bit early in the foundation session, you probably saw some demonstrations from Brad as well. The applications themselves are natively aware that if they are trying to access a cloud storage, a cloud email, they have to ensure that Intune is able to let them go through that. So again, the point here is that we've been trying to fix this by building the protection inside the applications themselves, such as Outlook, for example, or Office apps, or any other internal line of business applications that can use our Intune app wrapping tool to actually get the same story working there as well. So just another way of looking at it, the typical EMM stack nowadays consists of one, it's MDM, right? So MDM, pretty basic nowadays, a commodity. A lot of companies nowadays provide MDM. The next stack is they have their own productivity solution. So they have their own Word editing tool. They have their own email application. They have their own PowerPoint and other type of applications to view the corporate data securely. And they have their own wrappers. They have their own SDKs to wrap your own applications so they can work with their application management as well. So this is a pretty typical nowadays. Again, it's not like everyone does the same thing, but this is a pretty typical scenario for the EMM vendors in the market. And again, they are able to protect the corporate data on premises. Again, they usually have a DMZ. They usually have their firewalls and email gateways to get this thing working. This is the way it works today. The only problem, as I mentioned before, this only works on premises. Again, we have a very similar story here as well, at least for MDM. For MDM, we have Intune, which I'm going to cover a little more later. For productivity, we have best-in-class productivity tools. This is Office. This is Outlook. We also have applications that are needed for secure viewing as well, like Managed Browser, so your employees can securely view web pages as well, PDF viewer, image viewer, video viewer. So we have those applications as well. So we have a pretty good story here as well. And as well, we have our own SDK. We have our own app wrapping tool as well that enables companies to bring their own internal line of business applications to our management story as well. We do provide similarly access, being able to control the access to on-premises. Again, we have this story as well. Where we differentiate really is our ability to protect the cloud itself, right? The Intune Enterprise Mobility Suite that Intune is part of, which includes Azure Active Directory and Azure Rights Management, is the only solution nowadays that can also protect the cloud. And again, the way we do it, our SDK, our Office apps, they have built-in knowledge that in order to access the cloud, employees must first check with Intune to ensure that the device is managed and compliant to get access to corporate resources. We have a pretty unique story here. I already demonstrated that today earlier. I'm going to try to do it today, hopefully too as well, if our Wi-Fi is working. So I'm going to pray to the demigods that it works. So just to restate the same thing, when we think about data protection from the Intune point of view, from the enterprise mobility point of view, we think about two things. One is being able to restrict the access to corporate resources from devices. So you, as IT admin, have the control in your hands to say what type of devices, under what conditions, what do they have to have in order to access corporate data. That's basically our first line of defense, right? So you can decide who can access corporate data. The second line of defense is what happens with the data when it's already on a device itself. So this is where our mobile application management story comes into the play. This is where you can define app-level restrictions on applications on devices themselves. So you can decide what can the users do with applications. We do go beyond that. It's not only application management. We go to the file-level protection. This is where the Azure Rights Management comes into play. Again, Azure Rights Management is part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. You can secure the files themselves. So the first part of our story, how do you decide what kind of devices can access your corporate resources? We do it through our feature called conditional access. You probably heard about it. If not, I'm going to explain you now. The way conditional access works, for example, if your employees try to access your on-prem Exchange server or Office 365 or Exchange Online, for example, you can define a set of policies that the Intune will check on a device to see if the device is compliant or not, which means that Intune will check to see, does the device have these settings? If no, the access to email will be blocked. The user will not be able to access a corporate email both on premises or in the cloud if these settings are not on a device. However, Intune can automatically fix it or tell the user how to fix it. Once all the issues are fixed, then Intune integrates with Azure AD and tells the story like, hey, Azure AD, now the device is managed, now the device is compliant, the user can have access to the file. As you can see here, after that, the email access is granted to the personal device. So that's the first level that I was talking about, is how you decide what kind of devices can access your corporate resources. How about the files on the device itself? This is where the mobile application management policies come into play. So as IT admin, you can define you can enforce the corporate data access policies. So for example, if somebody launches a managed application managed by Intune, you can say what they have to do. Do they have to enter a PIN? Do they have to enter a corporate username and password to actually launch the application? So even though they can get access to the device, in order to access the application, they still have to enter either a PIN or a password. It's up to you to decide. The second area is your ability to prevent the data leakage. This is where the cut, copy, paste, save as restrictions come into the play. This is where you can decide, can the user copy something from an application and paste into their personal Notes app or personal Gmail app, for example? You have that ability as well. The third part here is the encryption. So we're able to encrypt the data, all the corporate data on a device. This is very important, and the most important part out of this is that as an IT admin, you can also have the ability to remove that data if necessary, which is the app-level selective wipe. So as an IT admin, you have an option either to fully reset the device, basically wipe everything on the device remotely from Intune Admin Console, or you can only remove the corporate data and leave the personal data intact. So you have an option to do it from the console, and the users can do it themselves from the Intune company portal. So if they don't want to be managed anymore, let's say they leave the company or they don't want their device to be managed because they're not doing any work on it anymore, they can actually remove their device, which means all the corporate data will be removed. So as a summary, basically, or what's important about the mobile application management is a few things here that are important for you to understand. So Intune is able to distinguish between the managed apps and personal apps. We only touch the managed apps, and we're not touching the personal apps. The important key here to understand is that we're the only solution in the market today that can manage Office mobile apps. So your Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook, running on iOS and Android. So we're the only solution who can actually do that. And I'm going to try to demonstrate that a bit later today as well. The second part is that as an organization, as a company, you can have the same mobile application management capabilities extended to your internal applications as well. So you can use either our Intune SDK or Intune app wrapping tool to wrap your application so they can have the same protection available as the Office mobile apps. And as I mentioned before, we also have the helper apps as well that help your employees to keep their corporate data protected, things like Managed Browser, a video viewer, PDF viewer, and image viewers. Those things are available as well. And the last part that I talked to earlier today already as well is the feature called selective wipe. Again, this is where all the corporate data is removed from devices, but the personal data is intact. So again, you as an admin have an option to do it from the Intune admin portal, or the employees can do it themselves. So as a summary, and I know I'm talking a little too fast because we do have a lot to cover, when it comes to data protection, I do think that Microsoft, or in this case, Enterprise Mobility Suite, does have the most comprehensive protection across 4 layers. So one is identity, right? This is where you can use Azure AD to actually protect the identity of the user. So things like authentication, single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, ability to get security reports from the Azure management portal, things like that available. So the important part here is that Azure AD is pretty huge, right? You can have your identities in the cloud. You can take your on-premise identities from on-premise Active Directory and extend it to the cloud. So you have options there as well. Level 2 is device management. This is where you can set device-level settings on devices. This is done through Intune. The layer 3 here is application management. This is where you can deploy app-level settings. Again, things like cut, copy, paste are available as well. And the last one that I mentioned a little earlier is Azure Rights Management. This is where you can protect the files at the file level. So it doesn't matter where the file travels. If somebody steals your device and they copy the file and move it to an Android device, they move it to a Windows server, the file itself is protected and only lets the user with access to actually access the application. So, and together, as I mentioned, all of these services are part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite that are available for purchase. So next, I'm going to go ahead and try to do the demo. So let's see if it works. Because Android is not the easiest platform to project. All right, let's see if it's working. Sweet, it is working. All right. So some of you already saw Brad's demo during the keynote with the Outlook app. Some of you also came to the foundation session for the Enterprise Mobility where I showed you the demo on iOS. So for this session, I was going to show you a demo on Android device because as I mentioned before, Intune is also able to manage the applications on Android as well. So let's start with Outlook. Again, the Outlook will have the ability to you'll soon have the ability to manage Outlook as well. Again, it's coming in Q2 of this year, so it's coming very soon. So as you see on the screen, when I launch Outlook, it tells me to enter my PIN, right? So again, this is a policy defined in Intune where I have to enter my PIN to access my managed application. Instead of a PIN, I could have requested the user to actually enter full corporate credentials, but that's too much work. So I'm going to enter my secret password here. And I can access my Outlook app. So one thing that Brad showed you earlier is he copied something from his iOS device, right, and tried to paste it into a personal application. So let's see if I can select something here. Okay, copy. So I'm going to copy here on the top. So let's say I want to paste it now into my personal application because I'm pressing here, and the paste option is not available, right? So I can't because the clipboard itself is encrypted. So this personal app doesn't have access to the clipboard, right? So the experience is a little different. With iOS, when you press and hold, it gives an option to do something else, but not paste. In Android, if there is nothing in the clipboard, it just doesn't do anything. And since this clipboard is encrypted, it doesn't have access to it. But if I go to my Microsoft Word account for application, for example, and I will try to open a new document and try to paste. Okay. Paste. And it's working, as you can see here.
1 second.
Oh, it's loading. It's working for me. It's loading. I'm not sure. It's the Wi-Fi probably. That's why.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, trust me, it's working. No, it's working. Let's see. That's weird, actually. Let's see. Okay. Oh. Okay, well, it's working. So if you don't believe me, I'll do it again. I don't know why it wasn't projecting. So I'll close this one. So I wasn't trying to fake anything here. So I'm going to launch Word, create a new document. You guys can see it. I don't know why it doesn't do it.
Suspicious.
Mm-hmm. But yes, I'm not sure why. I think the Wi-Fi is a little slow, but I'm able to paste it. So another scenario here is, for example, I can access my OneDrive for Business application, and I have access to my. Come on, Android.
I can vouch for him. I can see it. So.
Let's see. Let's try again.
Yay.
It's slow, but
looks
it's working.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, there must just be some lag with
Yeah.
that reflector thing.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look like it wants to show me here, so I apologize for that. All right, yeah, it doesn't want to work for some reason with the screen here. Okay.
I was enjoying the demo.
Yeah, all right, well, apologies for that. I mean, I'm not sure why it's not actually projecting here. It's probably because I was trying to get the USB working, but it wasn't working very well, so I had to use the Wi-Fi option, and the Wi-Fi doesn't seem to be working as consistent as it's supposed to be working. So on that, that's all I had to show you today. So as a summary, what we showed today is the fact that, again, with Intune and the Configuration Manager, you're able to enable users to be productive on device of their choice. Again, it's Windows, Windows Phone, iOS, and Android. But you also have the option to keep the corporate data protected at the same time. Again, this is where Azure Identity comes into play to protect your user identities. Intune is able to do two things here: manage the devices and also manage the application themselves. And the last there is the Azure Rights Management also, that is able to protect the files at the file level themselves. So I'm going to give the mic now to Mark and let him continue the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Vlad. So Vlad just kind of hit on the majority of what this slide is going after, which is the Enterprise Mobility Suite has a set of integrated experiences that work with the products that are in the suite. So Intune, Azure AD Premium, RMS, but also with Office 365. So, kind of to summarize those scenarios that he went through earlier on those PowerPoint slides and then showed me at least the demo. The key thing that we think we differentiate on compared to how competitors are in this sort of mobile application management space is really just that kind of integrated end-to-end scenario. There isn't a lot of extra gear to go set up. You just simply go set up Intune, use the Office apps. The Office apps are, they come from the store ready to go for understanding the Intune policies. And the whole hope is that it's really the apps that the end users love to use. We know that enterprise users, for the most part, like the Office applications, so that's why we wanted to just go and embrace those apps and not try to go build our own products to create a suboptimal end user experience. So that's kind of the key vision for us is just seamless integrated experience. Probably the two key scenarios he went over to really highlight that is the conditional access piece, which is about securing access to a remote resource like email server. And then the other one is the mobile application management story. Once the data is on the device, make sure that you can't have it leak off. And I'm sure you guys are tired of watching copy-paste demos, but you can do some other things like control access to OneDrive for Business and Dropbox. But the whole point there is have IT have control of where that information is on the device. The other kind of piece of our story is just the services that we have. So these are the fundamental services in the back end. This is Intune. This is AAD. We think we also have a differentiated solution relative to our kind of peers in this market space with the level of maturity that we have in our services, kind of the robustness that we have across different services here at Microsoft, whether that be the ones that are in the EMS suite or whether that's also Office 365 as well. The other angle of that as well is, we're continuing to make, innovations, make it easier to roll those out to end users. I'll kind of go over our different deployment options that we have here in a second. But the whole point here is we really have kind of embraced a model on the engineering team of, build a world-class service, make sure that highly reliable, we can deliver updates to customers in a way that they can, accept in a fairly fast cadence. And that's what we're sort of focused on as sort of a core principle of our engineering team. So now to get a little bit into sort of brass tacks options. We have two basic options today in market for what you kind of saw demoed or partially demoed there. One is what we'll call, or I might slip up and call, Intune Standalone. This is basically go and set up a cloud instance of Intune. You go to the cloud console and you manage all your devices through Intune. The other one is our hybrid option. This is where you take Intune and connect it to Config Manager. Vlad kind of touched on the, kind of some of the benefits of what that solution gives you. First and foremost, it gives you an integrated experience for managing all your devices. So kind of the hope there is you don't have to train your administrators twice. If you want to distribute an application to a PC, it's the same workflow that you would go through to distribute an app to a mobile device. There's a couple other subtle angles as well. Often we get kind of approached by customers around automation scenarios where they have, let's say, drive SECM for years using the SDK. So this is another great option if you have some form of automation because you can basically hook into the same API sets that we have in Config Manager today to drive automation for not just your PCs but also your mobile devices as well. A few other things that we have is scale. So right now, if you use Intune standalone, I think the scale limit is 50,000-ish devices. If you use the hybrid option, it's hundreds of thousands of devices. And we'll continue to make improvements on our standalone scale, but that's another reason why people will choose the hybrid option over the standalone option. Devices supported pretty much everything. That's where you can kind of manage everything all through one console. So before kind of getting into a little bit of what we're going to release here soon or have released, I just wanted to recap what we have done last kind of Q4 in case people have missed it. So Vlad already hit on the first row. That's that conditional access story. First and foremost, we delivered it on iOS devices just kind of around the end of last calendar year. So again, this is just that scenario of protecting access so that only a managed or compliant device can get access to email. The second set that we delivered at the end of last calendar year was mobile application management. And this is a bit of a, what I would sort of describe as a rolling story. And the reason that it's a story that will progress over time all ties back to the approach that we want to take. The approach is we want to have a nice, seamless, integrated story. So what that means is we've gone and partnered with a lot of the app writers, like Office, for example, to integrate our SDK and our kind of container, if you will, directly into those applications. So that's why in the end of last calendar year, you saw a set of applications come out. And what you've started to see now as the months have progressed into this calendar year, more apps are being added to the list. I believe they just announced where the new Outlook app will support our container story. You saw the beta version here in the demo. But the basic point is that over time, you'll see more and more apps participate in an ecosystem where you'll be able to kind of manage the content for those applications and also control access to these remote services as well. The other thing that we did too is just kind of a litany. I wish we had this giant projector here. Oh, thank you, Vlad, so I can see it here. Is we just have a long list of what I would kind of just call very checklist-like features added to the product, all super valuable, all super needed to be productive. But the point is, if you haven't looked at Intune in a while, let's say 6 months, there's been a ton of additional features that have been added. So I'm not going to kind of bore the audience and read through this entire list, but just to kind of hit on a few that we've been asked a lot for is, we completed that story that we had that slide on earlier around resource access. So being able to being able to grant access to Wi-Fi VPN with certificates is, super valuable. So we delivered on that. The other thing that we did too was multi-factor auth support. So critical for being able to kind of thwart a number of recent kind of hacking attempts that have popped up in the news. This is leveraging Azure Active Directory's MFA solution. So this is one where you can get like a phone factor challenge if somebody's trying to authenticate into Intune. You can have a multi-factor authentication flow if you want. And one of the other things we did too, and it's maybe a higher level narrative of a number of these bullets, is we really focused also on some task worker scenarios. I think it was a fair recap that early, middle, for the first middle of 2014, we were very focused on what we call information workers. These are ones that are kind of more of like a power user. They might bring their own device to work and so on. We put a lot of work into what is more like a task worker, maybe somebody using a device for a very specific job purpose, like a point of sales device or something like that. So we added support for supervised mode, kiosk mode, the ability to lock certain apps down. So we put a number of different features on that angle. And then that takes us to the bottom row, where we also supported work for service account enrollment. So that's interesting too, where you have a task worker-like situation, where you don't want the device to be enrolled for a given end user, because it's not really interesting who the end user is, because it's really a device for a utilitarian purpose, like taking an order or completing a credit card transaction. Let's see here. We talked about terms of use earlier. So now that takes us to, got messed up on the slides. Okay, so now that kind of takes us to what have we released so far this in 2015, which again is that same type of narrative of, Intune has released a ton of new capabilities, which maybe you just haven't seen through the various kind of conferences and events that we've had. So the top two rows tie in with what I mentioned before, where it's just a wave of additional improvements that you'll see us do with conditional access and mobile application management. It's really just about increasing the breadth of coverage. So what we've done is, you'll see the addition there of Android. So it's the same Office apps, but now the Android variants. You'll also see the support for OneNote, see the support for work folders, and that story will then, what I mentioned before, will kind of continue in 2015 as well. In that third kind of main row there, we added in just a number of other management features that have been asked for by customers. This is the ability, like number 3 is a good one. We've had a number of requests around, can we really restrict the number of devices that end users can enroll? We used to have this kind of licensed paper cap, but really you could effectively enroll like 20, 25 devices. So now we have it where we can restrict the number of devices that a single end user can enroll into the service. Also support for per-app VPN configuration is another kind of popular one that got asked for a lot. This is just kind of as the text implies, it's you set up a VPN tunnel just for a single app on the device, not for the whole device itself. And then another one, third from the bottom, hits a number of different segments that we have out there, which is our certificate management feature that we have now is based off of using the SCEP protocol with an NDES role. What this allows you to do is use PSK format certificates in order to kind of manage. Oh, sorry, I got that one wrong. Sorry, that's coming in the future. It's hard for me to tie all this together. So, so what we did there for Wi-Fi was just support the PSK shared keys, but that's a different one. So I'm going to cover the other one a little bit later. All right, the fourth row, another kind of set of sort of capabilities we had was the device enrollment program that Apple has. This is super valuable if you're purchasing devices from Apple. It's a neat program because what you can do is basically register the device ahead of time to be pre-wired to talk to a management authority. So you go and you buy your devices, and when they first boot up, they're wired to talk to Intune, which is nice because then you don't have to educate the users in terms of how enrollment works. Let's see if there's any kind of other ones here. The last piece, which will kind of dovetail into a slide that I'll have here in a second, kind of later on there, is hybrid. So if there's customers using Intune, one of the things that you can kind of see here is there was a ton of investments that went into our Intune offering, which based on those models I showed you earlier were our standalone offerings, so they're the ones that are out of the cloud. What we did in kind of the first part of 2015 is we delivered a few extensions for hybrid, but we just didn't have kind of that feature parity that our customers expect in order out of our hybrid configuration. So that I'll kind of answer that piece a little bit later. But what you see is we sort of delivered a few updates for our hybrid customers in the early 2015 timeframe, and then we got kind of serious, which you'll see in a second here about how we've kind of improved that story going forward. Now, in terms of roadmap, the item I think we both have mentioned is there'll be a new Outlook app coming out. So this completes the email story for basically being able to control information on a device. So this is the Outlook app with our app restriction policies capable within it. We'll also release an SDK for iOS. So if you have your own line of business applications that you want to write, you'll be able to directly integrate that SDK into those applications so that those can be part of that managed ecosystem on that device so that you can have sort of a free flow of information between managed apps. The other thing we'll have too is a wrapping tool. So kind of another kind of common stopgap ask is people don't want to necessarily have to go through and rewrite their application. So we have a wrapping tool where you can basically pump a file into it, wraps it with the right level of controls, and then you can import that into Intune for distribution and then management of that application. Let's see here, multi-identity, that was covered. I know the keynote demo kind of hit on that too, but that was a number of investments that we've made in the email experience, where if you're using an application that might be used for two purposes, like email is a great example where people tend to use the same email app for work and personal. You want to make sure you have a good experience to educate the end user so that they know, is this a work document? If it is a work document or an email, how is this secured? Why can't I do certain things between work and personal? So we've invested in that application, the Outlook application, to make that experience better. I think it's one of those features you just got to go try yourself to just see how that plays out versus me trying to explain it to you. The other thing that we're doing too is VPP support. So this is volume purchasing. It's kind of similar to DEP if you really pull it up a level. But what it's all about is if you want to purchase applications for the Apple Store for your end users, then you can go broker that connection with the Apple Store, buy set of applications for your end users, and then use Intune to distribute those applications out to your end users. And then the main advantage of that is your end users don't have to get charged for them. They don't have to put in a credit card or anything like that. And then obviously we'll be doing Windows 10 support. That's kind of it's one row, which means many, many things. And there'll be kind of a session that will go a bit deeper into that, and I'll kind of do some cursory coverage of what Windows 10 management means. But later in this week, there's a session where we go pretty deep into all the new management capabilities on Windows 10. And then Vlad mentioned the last row, which is Mac OS X support. So right now the way this is looking is this is kind of focusing on managing this like an MDM device. So they basically put the MDM stack in, I think, the Mavericks release of Mac a while ago. So this will be kind of managing that Mac with roughly the equivalent functionality you might be able to do with an iOS device. All right, so Windows 10 management. All right, good. So this is kind of the summary of what's happening. So what we are doing is config manager, obviously super important for Windows 10. And what is going to happen is there's going to be a new version. I'm not exactly sure what the name is going to be called, but that's what that first row is trying to say, is there's a new thing coming out called Config Manager Tech Preview. It got released today, I believe. At least the bits are live. So everyone can go and install it and kind of check it out. It's just a tech preview, so it's going to be kind of a sneak peek of just a subset of the things that we're looking to deliver. And it's going to be targeted for Windows customers who are, if you kind of remember the keynote, Terry kind of went in a little bit about how servicing will work. But it's going to be targeted for Windows customers who want to stay current, who want those customer features coming down as rapidly as possible. And it's also going to be targeted, obviously, for customers who are managing more of these mission-critical devices where they need the long-term service branch. So hopefully that isn't kind of too much of a surprise. New major version of Windows, what do you know? Config Manager is going to have a new product that kind of fully supports that. And by fully, what I mean is it's not just app compat for existing Config Manager features, but it's also support for the new Windows 10 features that are being delivered as well. One of the lessons we learned from our last go-around was that forcing people to do major upgrades of Config Manager and then asking them to do that as a prerequisite to get to the next major version of Windows was not the best idea. So what we've kind of, yes. So what we've sort of embraced is sort of the notion of if you're running Config Manager 2012, if you're running Config Manager 27, we want you to be kind of at least have the same level of management that you have with Windows 8. That's kind of the kind of the premise there. So what that means for 2012 is there's a new service pack coming. That service pack is going to be released here pretty quick. The 14th, you can see on the screen. That's going to be what I call app compat support. So you'll be able to do things like operating system deployments, software distribution, pretty much the same stuff you could do on a Windows 8 device. You can do, you just apply kind of the service pack 2, and then all of a sudden your Windows 10 stuff just works. CMO7, what we're going to do is release a hotfix. Might be cumulative update, but my guess it'll just be a hotfix. And it'll do the same, kind of the same story. The same things you can do to manage a Windows 8 device, software distribution, patch management, et cetera, you can go ahead and do. But just like Windows 8, you won't be able to do deployment. So our story for deployment is to use like MDT, or you could rely on other kind of means, but it's basically the same story that we have with Windows 8. And then my hope is we get everyone up to at least 2012 or make the leap to the next version. That would be awesome to go after as well. And then kind of the last piece is Intune. Intune, mentioned before, it'll kind of obviously support Windows 10. It'll support the new features. There's going to be a series of monthly updates to Intune, just like we do now, where you'll just likely see new features lighting up. I don't have a very prescriptive schedule of when all those Windows 10 feature will light up this month and et cetera. But the point is Intune will just do its normal thing where it gets updated by kind of the Intune engineering team and new features start to work. So that's kind of the broad view of the product changes that are coming out. So new version of Config Manager. Then there is SP2. Sorry, it's a little confusing name-wise, but there is an SP2 if you're an SP1 customer. And if you're an R2, then it's called R2 SP1. It's effectively kind of the same binaries. Yes, a little murmur of laughter. But that'll come out. And then there is a hotfix or something very kind of tactical, surgical for 2007 to fix minor app compat bugs. It's kind of the gist of it there. And then Intune will have a rolling set of cadences, or rolling set of updates on a monthly cadence. So that takes us to SP2, and then you can see the name there, R2 SP1. I got a slide, just 2 slides where we'll go into each of these buckets, so I won't kind of hit on these points, but I'll just talk, little kind of high level of what's coming here. So if I was to kind of summarize our engineering goals for SP2, there was really 2 fundamental ones. One was Windows 10 support, obviously hugely important, don't need to say much more about that. And then probably the other one was the hybrid parity. So this is where we basically have put a kind of lot of catch-up work for our hybrid customers to make sure that the people who have opted for that model have the feature parity that they're expecting to have from what we have available in our standalone offering. So at a macro level, that's kind of the 2 big things. Now to kind of dive into these areas in a bit more detail. First off, I'm not going to try to go too much into the OSD stuff. Aaron has a session later this week, and he's in town. He's our OSD PM, who's kind of our expert in that area. Feel free to go to his session or hassle him at the booth, and you'll get a kind of a deeper dive there. But probably the biggest thing that we did in this area is around upgrade. What Windows is moving towards is trying to shift the world to a model where you are using upgrade more than you're using kind of that wipe and load or refresh type of scenario. So what we've done to embrace that is we've made changes in the task sequence, which I'll do a little bit of a demo here just to kind of show you what it looks like, is to basically make that a first-class experience in Configuration Manager, and then also provide good auditing and tracking of the upgrade process in case there's a problem. So you get nice log files and things like that as you go through the experience. It's a bit kind of too long to actually demo the whole thing, but Aaron's going to cover it a lot more in his session. So that was kind of the major piece of work that we did. Then the rest of kind of those bullets under OSD were just a lot of just customer feedback points. So these were things like the driver management UI was kind of cumbersome, or it didn't allow people to get through certain scenarios. So that's where we made improvements to make that happen. Or there was a hole in our our role-based access story where they had to set up roles differently than they really wanted to from an administrative point of view, just because of the way we had our task sequence media wired up to our security system. So we made it so that you can sort of granularly set permissions on that one task of creating standalone media, which is good. So, I think kind of the summary point on OS deployment is big chunk of work to support Windows 10. Think about a new ADK coming out. Think about this embracing the upgrade story. And the other piece that we did was just support kind of a litany of just sort of bug DCR level changes that went in there as well. The other piece that we did too is for resource access, which kind of ties into a lot of our sort of hybrid story that's coming out too, is we supported multiple NDES servers. So if you're in kind of a more complex environment or larger environment where you need to support more of those, then that'll be supported in R2 or SP2 or R2 SP1. The other piece that we did was around application management. So, reasonable amount of app compat work went into just supporting the kind of existing features that we have on Windows 10. And then what we also did is we fixed some bugs. So, like a good 2 good examples of that were around app model supersedence. So we ran into some basically performance-like bugs for people who are using the supersedence feature, so we fixed that. Another one that kind of came up a lot is if people were trying to use AppV apps in a VDI session, a general complaint that we got was that the icon just didn't show up very quickly. It could take like 2 minutes or so. And that just creates a pretty poor end-user experience when they log in and then they don't see anything and then their apps pop after a minute or two. So what we've done is we've increased the performance of when we display the AppV icons to be on par with the AppV server. So what we basically found out is people were they weren't using Config Manager for AppV, for VDI, they were setting up a standalone AppV server. So we didn't want that to persist. So that's why we kind of took the work to improve the performance there. Let's see here. The next area is content management. So obviously content management is like the lifeblood of our product in a lot of ways. So that is like a never-ending list of feedback points from our customers. So we've made some improvements in terms of just how basically work on reliability. This is, the text is to me pretty clear. It's, let's say you got a WAN link that's kind of flaky or slow. We do a much better job with checkpoint restarts so that you don't have to kind of abort the whole job and restart the whole thing again. The other thing we did too was pull DPs. We've been trying to push people to that model, kind of look at that as a kind of a good way to help with hierarchy planning and simplification. But the problem was, some of the scale and performance problems that crept up. So we've made some improvements in that area as well. That then takes us down to hierarchy. Just kind of in the sake of time here. What's probably the two most interesting, well, probably three, is we've improved the MP selection, made it a lot easier for people to make sure that the right MP gets assigned to a client. Second most interesting thing to me, maybe it's just for a real subset of our customers, is we've improved the scale of the hierarchy. So now you can have a hierarchy of up to 600,000 devices. And then the last piece is SQL 2014 support. So we support that today, but it's with a hot fix. So that's what we mean by native, is it's directly supported in the product. And then I'll kind of cover the next question people often have in just a second here, which is, what about SQL 2014 features? Do we support things there? And I'll cover that later. All right, hybrid. So another kind of eye test slide. This is the best way to summarize this is we've effectively kind of closed the gaps that we have with our standalone service in terms of the, there was a feature released, let's say in December for our standalone Intune. Our hybrid customers would say, geez, where's my feature? SP2 will kind of close the door there. There's a bit of a deeper technical story to tell here too. What we're doing in SP2 is we're improving the plumbing of Config Manager so that we can release more extensions. The primary reason that these gaps exist is because we were just not capable of updating Config Manager for these features. They required something that we couldn't do through our extensibility model, is kind of the gist of it. So a good way to kind of think about it is we basically improved SCCM's extensibility model in SP2 so that these types of features could be theoretically delivered as extensions in the future. So don't kind of hold me to this, but mathematically, you can kind of think of it this way. With SP1 and R2, we may have been able to release extensions for 60% of the Intune features that were being released. With SP2, with the kind of plumbing changes that we're able to make in a service pack, we're moving that to like 85%. And then what we're going to do in the next version of Config Manager, which will be released later this calendar year, that will kind of make it to like 99%. So kind of the whole point here is, we know that hybrid customers are super important and don't want to kind of have them, holding the bag in terms of getting the latest capabilities. So that's why we're making these sort of plumbing improvements. And this is just a slide you can look at later for how we are going to catch up on a lot of the gaps. Okay, so that takes us to the technical preview. So this is again just going to be sort of a subset of the features that we're going to support in the next version of Config Manager. So mentioned 10, it'll be Windows 10 support, full feature support. In-place upgrade I mentioned already. Hybrid, kind of checked on that as well. The other piece that we're doing too is making the support for client deployment and upgrade monitoring much easier for people to look at. There's a bit of a deeper story here. The deeper story is if you look at what Windows is doing, Windows is trying to move people to a model where the OS will get updated much more frequently. And what that could basically fall back into is a model of great, new Windows 10 feature came out, love it, want to be able to support that in my enterprise as some new enterprise feature. But as me as like the config manager guy, I don't want to be in the model of having to go tell you to go upgrade your hierarchy every 4 months, every 6 months, whenever some new Windows feature comes out. So it ties to what I had mentioned just a little bit ago about hybrid. One of our big things that we're doing in this next version of the Config Manager product is making it much easier for you to upgrade the product. We really want to just make it where things, if you use the Intune extensions, we want that model to be how we deliver a lot of our updates going forward for these new Windows 10 features that are coming out. We want to be able to send you very kind of small tactical changes to the product. Hopefully that then lowers the risk of change. And then we build in some core mechanics like how can we make the client upgrading, much kind of more bulletproof? How can we provide the status and reporting to make it, super easy for you to go through that process? So that's kind of the deeper narrative here around some of the changes that we're doing. It's not just about supporting Windows 10. It's also trying to keep that, evergreen or whatever the right word is in the enterprise for that operating system. And then probably the last one, which might be actually my personal favorite feature, is supporting Config Manager on Azure VMs. So that is, we get asked a lot, like, can I install Config Manager on Azure VMs? And I'll go in a slide where I kind of articulate what that means, because people think it's caveat laden, which our current support story is, and I'll hopefully explain well enough why we're doing that. Let's see here. In-place upgrade. I'm just looking at the clock, and I wanted to leave like 5 minutes for questions, so I'll try to hit these next slides pretty quick and then close and have time for questions. But as I kind of mentioned before, Windows has invested a lot in in-place upgrade. They've corrected a lot of things in setup where you can actually perform an upgrade with a reasonable confidence that it's going to work. Like, for example, if you had any kind of language packs in the past, people just wouldn't use upgrade for that because it just wouldn't work. So they've corrected a lot of the mechanical issues with upgrade. As a result, we wanted to embrace that, and our version of embracing that is, by building that into our operating system deployment feature where we have kind of an upgrade task sequence. So that's kind of work that we've done. And then I want to hop into a VM really quick just to show you what that looks like in a second here. And then the last piece, which I failed to mention on that summary slide, is there'll be a new option for MDM where you can manage Windows 10 devices on premise. And then one of the common things I get asked a lot is, okay, great, why Windows 10? Why can't I do more devices? And the basic point here is embedded. So what has started to happen, and this started with embedded 8.1, is a lot of the embedded devices have moved more towards the phone form factor, or the phone OS. So in order to manage those, you can't put a config manager client on those. They have to be managed through MDM, through the inbox agent. So that's why our first and foremost priority was to make sure that these Windows 10 devices, which are in kind of these, Internet of Things realm or embedded realm, we wanted to make sure that we had a solution to manage those. The reason being is we have a ton of config manager customers, I'm sure there's many in the room, that rely on managing these sort of embedded scenario-like devices, point-of-sales machines, et cetera. Through Config Manager. So that's why our pivot has been pretty hard with our on-prem MDM story to manage those first and foremost as Windows 10 devices. And if you look at it from that lens, you'll also then kind of understand, some of the feature choices that we made and what we're focused on. But the point here is, first and foremost, with this next version of Config Manager, you'll be able to connect that to Intune, and you'll be able to manage these Windows 10 kind of IoT-like devices. And you can certainly manage all Windows 10 devices. What Windows has done, which is nice, is they really unified into a single management agent across all the different Windows 10 platforms. And that's nice because just, as long as the SKU supports it from a licensing construct, just the underlying technical mechanics are all pretty clean and consistent. So that should be pretty neat to kind of roll out. What you'll notice here is a little bit of the parsing of features just to set people's expectations. You can go and install the technical preview today. You'll be able to enroll the device, but you'll have to do it yourself as a user. That usually doesn't fly with a task worker or an embedded device. You'll want to do something more like bulk enrollment, put the thing on top of an NFC card and get a cert on it and bootstrap enrollment that way. That'll come later. We plan to kind of have a series of releases for this next Config Manager product coming out in terms of, sneak peeks. So expect us to kind of have more information soon on when the remaining stuff will come. But at the least, at the worst case, it'll come at RTM when the product ships. So that's kind of the story there is you'll be able to play around with it at Tech Preview, but don't expect perfection. We're going to kind of build that over time over the remaining months here. Let's see here. Oh, that's animation. Sorry. Let me get through this. Too much animation. All right, Azure VMs. So we do support Azure VMs in market today, and it's got these kind of caveats, which I can never remember, and I have to go look up the TechNet article. The basic point here is we don't want there to be limitations, but there are limitations. So if you if you basically look at Azure as an extension of your data center, the same restrictions come into play with if you're trying to install a config manager server in your own data center. So like my best example of this is OSD. Just like we don't support OSD over the internet, but you can certainly go with the next version of config manager, install it in Azure, and you can service PXE requests. You just need to set up express routes, set up a tunnel basically between your corporate network and your Azure VM so that those PXE requests can get there. That's no different than our support story today for on-premise config manager where you have a device at home trying to talk over the internet. We don't support that scenario. It's just, it's a mechanical problem. We need to get the PXE request to kind of phone home. So the same limitations that we have today in product will apply in the Azure space, but we really just want Azure VMs to be just like Hyper-V. So the same site planning, the same way you think about setting up a hierarchy, you just do the same thing. It just happens to run on top of an Azure VM. You know, I get to ask questions like, well, what about bandwidth? Same math you would go through. You know, just like if you're going to put a site server in a physical data center, you would still do the same networking, you know, check that you would do if you had it running up in Azure. You just need to understand what that network looks like, how you would plan it. But the whole point there is we're actually trying to have a pretty simple story, which then kind of, you know, people go, it can't be that simple. But that is the goal that we want to have, is just, you know, it's going to be up to the customer and, you know, consultants and whatnot to size the VMs correctly, make sure the network is set up correctly. But as for just config manager, it's all going to be pretty, you know, much the same that we support today. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, we got just a few minutes, so let me just sort of hop out, and these are really quick demos too. So what I wanted to kind of show you is what that upgrade piece looks like. It's actually pretty simple. It's part of the reason I wanted to show it. What you do in Windows 10 now, if you want to support the, oh geez, just 1 second, sorry. Yeah, in Windows 10 you want to stare at my desktop. Let's see here. All right, perfect. Okay, so in Windows 10, this kind of all goes with how you might do upgrades going forward. So what we've done is, in this next version of Config Manager, we've added a new object type called Operating System Upgrade Package. That upgrade package is really just point at the media. So you basically just get the Windows 10 media, put it in a folder, just like you would take application binaries and just say that's the path for my media. So kind of the sake of time here, that's what I've done with one of these pre-builds of Windows, is I've created this upgrade package, which is an object in our system, but really all it's doing is just going to where I copied basically the media you could get on a DVD, if anyone gets those anymore, and you would just build this upgrade package. Nothing kind of terribly fancy there. Then what you do is you head over to Task Sequence, and with Task Sequence you create, and I apologize if you can't see this in the back of the room, is there's a new option for upgrade a operating system with an upgrade package. You kind of go through there, you can give it a name, you basically then select that upgrade package, which is just basically pointing at the media, and you can enter a product key if you want to, you know, have this be kind of a final rollout. And then you have a few options around whether you want to kind of force an update check at the end. You also have you also have the ability to just add in some additional applications that you might want to add in by moving to the new OS. And let's see if it works. I love doing beta code. Perfect. And that's about it. And then if you go back into Task Sequence Editor, it's just basically kind of a simple task sequence, sort of admin experience. But the value that we kind of provide here for Config Manager is we do a lot of kind of state reporting as the system's transitioning through the reboot states. We'll provide kind of the log information back, kind of the tracking, just in case there is a problem or there's like an app compat check and setup that gets flagged. We'll be able to surface that information back to the admin. So this is kind of, what I mentioned before. We really wanted to make upgrade kind of a first-class option so that you can make that happen. If you do want to use Config Manager 2012 in market today to do this, there is a blog that's posted or a TechNet article that's posted on how to pull that off now. But what you lose or what you don't quite get is this sort of richer reporting information that we'll have in the next version of Config Manager. And then the last thing I wanted to show you, which I honestly can't figure out a really good way to demo like the Azure VM piece, other than like me showing Azure and look, it's a VM. But this, so if anyone has any suggestions on a cool demo, let me know, or I'll need to think of one over the coming months. But the only thing I could really think of was, when we install something on, maybe you can't quite see it in the back of the room, but the basic point here is this entire, this kind of demo environment I set up is on an Azure VM. It was super easy. You just go, if you ever played with the kind of Azure VM service before, it's easy. I just went and selected a server with SQL pre-installed, waited, I forgot how long it took, 20 minutes, the thing's done. Once it was done, I just installed SCCM. SCCM got installed, and that's the only thing that I know that it's on Azure. Is it basically kind of tells me that it's running on a VM, very similar to how we do display that information for Hyper-V. It's now set up on Azure. And then probably the more complicated part of this whole thing is what I mentioned before with the networking piece, where setting up the right level of networking to make sure your scenarios play out. So I don't know. I'll come up with some flashier demo here, but to me, it's a kind of a super cool scenario to get moving on. So let me kind of cut back over to the deck here. Yes, great. All right, so that kind of wraps it up. I missed my 5-minute thing, but it's close. So kind of key message that we want people to leave is manage mobile productivity. That's basically protect your information on these mobile devices. Key to that is the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So that has all those different components. Windows 10 is coming, and we will support that. So we, meaning Config Manager and Intune, we're going to go through a massive amount of changes, new products, new service changes to support that. There's going to be a session later this week where we'll go into the depths of all the new enterprise features in Windows and talk about how those can be managed. If you can make that, I think that'll be pretty interesting from all the demos we're going to cook up. It'll be a lot more interactive than this type of a session. And then the last piece is Intune. Lots of change has come. Hopefully you can get access to this deck and the material because it's just way too much to just read off. So thanks for taking the time. I apologize again for the whole room change and everything. And anyone online, thanks for listening in. If you have questions, feel free to come up.